Leroy Harris is a Jayhawk on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawk.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. That was a tough line to walk, trying to do the Leroy Jenkins bit while still trying not to wake up a baby right now. Anyway, this is a little bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for tuning in. Everydayers catching each and every show. And if you're catching our bonus episodes, I guess a double everydayer. But on today's episode, Kansas football made an addition via the spring transfer portal with an FCS Freshman All-American in Leroy Harris III, who is a defensive end from Tennessee Chattanooga. So we'll get into that on this bonus episode of the show, what he brings to the table, his scouting report, how he fits in, how it's a direct reaction, you would think, to the By Job news, and what it currently looks like for the KU defensive end room at this point in time. Let's start right there with Leroy Harris III. This is the first spring transfer portal edition for KU football for the 2025 offseason. Leroy Harris III is a 6'5", 240-pound defensive end from the FCS level out of University of Tennessee Chattanooga. He chose Kansas over some offers from like Bowling Green, Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina, and Florida Atlantic. And Phil Steele named Harris a FCS all-freshman team performer from this past season. So that obviously shows that he's got, good potential and was able to provide some real impact right away in year one. He's going to be a true sophomore in the fall of 2025, which will be his first year, obviously, with Kansas. So that means he has 3 more seasons of play, but he hasn't taken a red shirt. So theoretically, if he does end up being a second or third string, you could try to limit him to only playing 4 games this year. And obviously, if you make a bowl game, he could play in the bowl game as well. To where you could preserve redshirt, and then you'd have 3 more years after this one, hypothetically. Again, if he's good enough, you don't worry about that. And in today's day and age where, players transfer so quickly, I don't think you need to worry about that as much. But either way, you're in a good position here with a lot of years left on a kid who already produced at a pretty good level in year one at the FCS level which, yes, it is a jump, but we've seen plenty of players make, an FCS jump, make a Division II jump, right? We saw it here locally with Kansas and Dominic Pooney. So either way, this was a quick reaction, I think, by Lance Leipold and company after they lost By Job. And so if you remember, we just had the bonus episode, thank you if you already caught it, about By Job leaving the program and transferring out from KU. And what you lost in By Job, he might have been second string, he might have been a third string at defensive end, right? You probably lost some rotational snaps there, but probably wasn't as big of a loss this year as it could be in the future. By Job, somebody with high potential down the road. Well, with Leroy Harris III, he might be a rotational guy, kind of similar to how By Job would be. But the idea here, I think, is that Harris can give you something down the road, whether that's a year from now, 2 years from now, that he can be a possible, 6'5", he's got the frame for it. And this staff has done a really good job bringing in transfer portal defensive ends, and whether it's more about them finding diamonds in the rough or about developing them or a little bit of both, they've been able to do just that. And so I think that gives you all the hope in the world about a kid who did show some of that flash in year one, that he's going to be able to replicate and replace what you lost in terms of some of that potential with By Job on the other side. But he also does add to the group, I think, this year, and probably will be getting some rotational snaps. But again, all that kind of depends on how he adjusts and how he plays with the team during summer and fall camp. All right, let's get to his scouting report. What exactly does he bring to the table, as well as what does that defensive end group look like for KU on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks? This bonus episode of the show is brought to you today by Game Time, where you'll be able to get KU football tickets. Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere, of some of the playoff games going on right now, whether it's NBA or NHL. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every hit, every goal, every moment just feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60 And I was looking earlier today, I was looking at Royals tickets for the series they're playing against the Colorado Rockies. You can get, if you want to, maybe play a little hooky on Thursday at work. It's a day game, but tickets as low as $2 on Game Time there, right? And they have last minute deals where, again, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Our bonus episode here, Leroy Harris III, officially a Jayhawk. KU lands him out of the transfer portal. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. All right, what is the scouting report for Harris? He came out of high school as an 84 graded 3-star. He was a linebacker prospect out of Nashville, Tennessee, where he went to Christ Presbyterian Academy. And his Max Prep profile has some of his stats from high school. Senior, played both ends. He was a tight end in addition to playing on the defensive side of the ball. And he had 270 yards on offense. He also had 3 interceptions on defense, 6 over his last 2 years there. 47 tackles, 7 for loss, and a sack in that final season. And he had an offer to Memphis. He also had offers to Navy, Air Force, some other FCS schools, some Ivy League schools, which is obviously part of the FCS. He also had a preferred walk-on offer from Ole Miss out of high school, but he chose to go the FCS route, chose to go to UT Chattanooga. And I think, I'd imagine for a lot of kids, it's like if you have the choice between going to an FCS school or preferred walk-on at this point at a, Power 5 university, a lot of them are going to bet on themselves and go to the FCS school and then be like, okay, I'm going to try to ball out in 1 or 2 years and then enter the portal and maybe I'll wind up at that school on scholarship, right? And so he ends up at a power school in Kansas in the end here. He played at 6'5", 230 pounds as a freshman is what he was listed as there. Now he's listed at 6'5", 240, so he's already gained some positive weight. That's a good sign there. And in that first and loan season with Chattanooga, he played all 12 games for the team. They went 7-5 in the FCS, so solid team there. He had 11 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 1 pass deflection, 3 fumble recoveries, 1 that he ended up scooping and scoring for a long touchdown. But overall, 302 snaps of play for him as a freshman, and he had a cumulative Pro Football Focus grade of about 59. Again, 60 is about kind of average there. So you figure, okay, well, you're a freshman getting thrown into the fire, like playing on the line of scrimmage as a freshman, true freshman, is going to be difficult on either line of scrimmage. So when you grade it on a curve, being really close to just kind of average there is actually pretty impressive for a young player, because it tells you that, okay, once you start to, figure out all the playbooks and the mental side of things of the, all the little nooks and crannies of playing college football, and the, your body fully catches up with everything, and you get it to a point where, maybe he winds up being 6'5", 250 or 255 or something at Kansas, right? And you have more training and more practice under your belt and those sort of things. It tells you that if your floor was as a freshman, theoretically, where you're getting better every year, that he could be a pretty darn good player. He had a 60.1 grade in run defense, 69.5 in tackling, 60.6 in pass rush. He had 12 pressures that came from 11 hurries and 1 quarterback hit. And by the way, those 12 pressures, it came on 161 pass rush snaps, which basically would be like if you were viewing that as like a pressure rate of how often he's getting a pressure on one of his pass rush snaps. It was about 7.5%, which, like, out of comparison, Dean Miller led Kansas last year at a 9.5% pressure rate. This among KU players with at least 50 pass rush snaps. Robinson, Jeremy, had a 9.2%. Dylan Woodkey was at 9%. And then you have a drop off to DJ Warner, who was at 5.1%. So he was kind of between where those two numbers were, again, doing it as a freshman. Now, he did play against an FBS team last season. And it wasn't just any FBS team. It was a college football playoff team in Tennessee. And in that game, he had 2 tackles. He had a 63 PFF grade. So, was solid enough in that game, which is even more impressive considering that it wasn't just that they were playing up in competition. That was his first collegiate game. That was their first game of the season. And he was pretty consistent overall. Like, you normally don't see that as much from young players, the consistency. He had 1 bad, game of a 43 PFF grade against Citadel. He had a high of a 69.2 against Furman when he had 4 tackles. 9 of his other 10 games had PFF grades between 55 and 64. So he was pretty consistently between that notion, which I think that's part of what gets you on the field as a young player. Can you be consistent? He also has good family lineage. His dad played at NC State. Then he played in the NFL for 7 years. Between the Titans and the Lions, he was an offensive lineman. What does that tell you? I mean, it kind of tells you that he's got obviously like good genes and he's got NFL genes, but that tells me that there's more room for growth and development, which I think you kind of like to see. All right, what does the current defensive end room look like now for KU? Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Prize Picks, and Tuesday is the perfect day for Prize Picks because they have their Taco Tuesday going on when Prize Picks offers discounts on select player projections for even more value. And baseball season's in full swing too. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. It's fast and simple. You can set up your lineup, takes less than 60 seconds, and when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game with Prize Picks. Thanks for joining us on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and don't forget to check out our regular daily episodes here on Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode coming out tomorrow is going to be talking about KU basketball and I guess KU athletics as a whole and college sports as a whole and the money game side of things there, as well as a little latest in the transfer portals. KU football nabbing a defensive end. They lost by Job earlier this week. Now you go out and get Leroy Harris III, and that gives them 8 scholarship. I guess everybody's scholarship now, right? Or will be whenever it officially gets like signed off and stuff. But 8 defensive ends basically on the roster. Seems like Kansas could be in the gunning or running, I guess, for one more. And I think Cam Williams, we've talked about a couple times throughout our shows here from Georgia State. He is going to be visiting this week too. So that's an opportunity to try to add yet another defensive end. So when you're looking at the probable starters, I think you look at Justice Finkley, the transfer from Texas, starting at the strong side. You look at Dean Miller starting as the weak side, which he did this past season. From there, it's kind of a wide open competition. And I think that's where it comes into play. Could they go out and get another defensive end to maybe nail down one of those top backup spots, similar to how this past season, you felt like you had a pretty stern top 3 in the rotation, right? With Woodkey rotating in for Jeremy Robinson. And then you have some young players who are all very talented, but how are they going to figure in? Are they going to be ready right away? Like with Dakius Brinkley, former 4-star recruit, redshirt freshman. I think he's going to be a really good player. Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year, right? Same with Caleb Red, redshirt freshman. Adrian Hawley and Garrett Martin coming in as true freshmen. Now Leroy Harris III comes into that fold as a true sophomore. And then kind of the wild card in all this is Dylan Brooks, who is a redshirt junior coming off that season-ending injury, and that kind of throws a wrench in things because it usually takes guys time coming off season-ending injuries, right? But if you're talking about priorities now of what to add in the portal, I do think offensive line becomes priority 1, and honestly, it might become priority 2. Like maybe you need to add 2 offensive linemen. Maybe it's even most after that important to bring on like another corner for depth there. But yeah, you could use another defensive end. I also think you're always in a situation where if any good player at any position wants to join, you make that happen and you make it work. But overall, I'm feeling pretty good about the defensive end group because I like Finkley and Miller as starters. I like the potential of, okay, can one of these young players between Brinkley, Red, Hawley, and Martin, can one of them give you contributing snaps this year? Can Harris give you at least rotational snaps? And then whatever you get from, I think, Dylan Brooks or any of the other young players would be kind of the cherry on top this year for KU. And again, if you do add another defensive end, then that bolsters it a little bit more. But I'm liking the way this group is looking at this point, especially knowing there could be another addition if you are KU. All right, that'll do it for this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Be back at you for a full edition of Locked On Jayhawks tomorrow. See you then on LOJ.